Welcome back to the Mom Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And today we're very excited to have Henrik Ståhl on the show. And we got some great topics lined up. Mob programming in general from a product manager perspective, from Heinrich's perspective, and talk about MVP and moving stuff, moving fast and breaking stuff. And maybe we'll move stuff too. Who knows? Before we jump to those topics, Heinrich, can you give an introduction for yourself, please?
Yes, thanks a lot for having me on the show. My name is Henrik Ståhl. I'm a product manager in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden, the capital of Sweden. I've been working with product development for about 10 years. I used to be a journalist before then, so I was a journalist for
Okay.
my whole life before transitioning to product development. Mostly been doing web related stuff, but like traversed all of the different environments within web development. Like I've been working with iOS apps and Android apps and web and whatever. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Well, I guess jumping into our first topic, from a product manager's perspective, how did you get into the mobbing game, so to speak, and what's it been like for you?
So I was very lucky because I was a junior product owner. This was 10 years ago, like in 2015. That's when I started, actually. That's when I joined a mob session for the very first time. And the funny thing about it was that I was also the very first product owner ever to join a mob session at that company back in those days. As I said, I was a journalist. I transitioned to product development, but I still worked within the news industry. So it feels like I was kind of born into news, kind of ish. I left the news industry like 6 years ago because I wanted to try other things. But back then, I had this like I was so lucky because I was working with a developer who is she's like one of the biggest evangelists of mob programming in Sweden, and she's helped a bunch of companies in Sweden, introduced mob programming as a way of working. So I got the opportunity. I was working with her and the team, and she was like, "You want to join?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." Like I can't do anything. Like I'm not a programmer, obviously. Um, but sure, like what do I need to do? And like, oh yeah, you need this and this. You need GitHub. You need. So I was actually like, I actually joined. I actually did things. I had no idea. I still have no clue what I did, but I did things, and I learned a lot. So yeah, and it's been great. Like in Sweden, like I'm a very I tend to describe myself as a very vocal advocate of mob programming in Sweden because from my perspective, it's about collaboration. Like it's the most collaborative way, or there is no better way of collaborating than doing mob programming. Actually doing the stuff for real together, like in a room, at the same computer at the same time, all the
But,
things.
what was the big difference, I guess? So had you been just giving the team tasks for a while and then they invited you in and did you see a noticeable change, or was it just a like observational experience that helped you connect with them more? Like what was the before and after there?
I was actually working with several different teams. At like before leaving that company, I was the unofficial record holder of product ownership because I was officially the product owner of 19 different systems,
Oh wow.
uh, of which some of them I had never even heard of, but I was still listed as product owner of those systems. But I worked with several teams, and some of them were in another country, basically in Vietnam. So
Hmm.
those were the teams that I was regularly working with. So when I was when I was in this first mob session, it was with a team that I wasn't working on or working with on a day-to-day basis. So, and with the other team, it was more like how do you say, like it was more traditional, more of the things you described, like having tasks, having requirements. I hate the word requirements. That's like one of the worst words in product development is requirements. But we were dealing with requirements in this very kind of waterfally way of working. But at the end of my stint, I was there for almost 4 years. And by the end of that term, the team, although I wasn't working with them in mob sessions, because of the time difference, because of different locations and so on, they were working in mob sessions. And we had, discussions about the stuff we wanted to do. It wasn't like I told them, hey, do this. I asked them, what do you think we should do? And then, you know, we collaborated. We agreed on stuff to do. Yeah. So, but I was lucky enough to work with that team, and then I was also part of a different team. Like we built our own in-house. Uh, we created an in-house built headless CMS. It was a really grand endeavor. There weren't too many headless CMSs back then in 2015, 2016. But there was also a pretty big team, and they regularly had mob sessions, which I joined on a daily basis, basically. And then the rest is history.
So when you when you joined this mobbing session, um, I guess how did it affect how you approached communicating with other teams, after that? Did it change how you approach, you know, uh, dealing with requirements, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Because I think like um, everything about product development, and I think this, of course, there are differences in different industries and whatever. It's not like we can't say that everything is the same. That would be silly. That would that's just insane. That's the whole point with talking about agile. It's that everything like there are so many unknowns. But what I tend to say with confidence is that everything boils down to communication. So having someone saying to someone what to do, that's not communication. Or I mean, it's sort of a one-way communication, but that's not my definition of communication. Like, how can we possibly know what to do unless we talk it through, unless we think it through? And why would we be several people in a team if we wouldn't do that together? Like that's kind of that's the nuances I get from those very early mob sessions. Is that also kind of in my mind, it doesn't really matter what you call them. Of course, we have a name for it, like with mob programming, but you could also do workshops. And I know some people hate the word workshop. Like when I was working with William Banting, who you had on the show recently, he hated the word workshop because he had so many connotations, with workshops. But then I did some workshops with him that I didn't call them workshops. I just called them sessions. Like, let's have a session. And we just talked about things. And then we did things and we designed things together. And it's like, this is basically a workshop. It's just, that's not like we're doing things. We're doing things together. So it doesn't really matter. And to me, like where the magic happens is obviously when we're doing the implementation. So that's the great thing about the mob programming sessions, that's where everything actually happens. Everything up until then, that's just planning, or it's not. I mean, it's not like designing isn't doing stuff, but like implementation is where it actually comes to fruition. So
Nice, nice. I found quite novel what we were saying with mobbing being a more effective communication style or way or method or something like that. Because I think you're right. At root, a lot of product development, software development is communication, right? And a
yeah,
lot of the problems are from miscommunication. And if you are making something, editing it, like doing it, like actually having a session, doing something real together, right? Um, then and discussing as you go, those feedback loops of understanding what you meant by making it and showing it to you, seconds later, or saying, "I hear you saying this. Did you say that?" And having that conversation. So the talking and making together and seeing it all together, it
mm.
can eliminate so many problems that happen in communication, right?
Yeah, yeah, like
And
almost
so I,
everything.
yeah, and so I think it's interesting to think of mobbing from that angle as kind of like a communication error correction process.
Yeah.
Um, but you're right, from a product manager's perspective, that is key, right? Because how many problems come from misunderstanding, right?
Yeah. And I have some example, also kind of circling back to Chris' question about like, how this affected me. One very, very sort of tangible way this has affected me is that I have, you know, from my perspective, working in a team means doing stuff together. I usually say that if we are working in a team but we're not working together, then we're just a group of people doing random stuff. And then like, yeah, but isn't that the definition of a team? It's a group of people. Yeah, but like if it's just a group of people doing separate things randomly, like why are we then a team? Then we're just a group of people doing random shit, like, all over the place. That's yeah, that's not collaboration, and that it's kind of pointless to me. And also, if like, with the knowledge sharing, which is in again from my perspective one of the strongest things about mob programming, is that everyone can get into anything and kind of, if you need to fix something, if you need to create something new, whatever, everyone has a pretty good understanding of what we're doing and how it's implemented. So one way it has affected me is that I find it quite unacceptable when stuff happens and people say, "Oh, I can't fix that because, Austin did that thing and Austin is on vacation." Or like, "Yeah, Chris is sick, so we're gonna have to wait for him to be unsick in order to fix this, thing that might be critical. Maybe not, super critical, but like." And I find that quite, unacceptable, to be honest. I think like we can't work like that, right? Like that isn't that the whole again, isn't that the whole point of having teams with clear ownership, which is a good thing, is that you're supposed to be able to tackle things, even though sure, uh, Chris might be better at some things, for example, I don't know, pronunciations, but like Austin should still be able to do them. You see what I mean? Like we all
Yes.
have our different skill sets, we all have our different strengths and weaknesses and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that everyone has to be as good as each other. But like Austin, you should still be able to do things that Chris might be better at. But like if Chris, yeah, he needs to be sick sometimes, and then someone has to step up. Like that's one thing. And also, like you said, Austin, with misunderstandings when it comes to communication, a lot of times when I see people working very isolated and separated, there are lots of decisions that are being made, and then you have a pull request, and another developer is reviewing this and say, "Oh, so you did it this way, but I would probably have done it this way." And then there's a discussion, and we all agree that, "Oh yeah, we should probably have done it this way." And then you need to redo it. Like, wouldn't it have been so much better if we had that discussion before it was actually implemented, right? Like, would it have been so much better if you just sat down and talked about, yeah, this is what we want to do, and this is probably how we should do it, and so on and so forth. And then we, would have done it instead
Yeah.
of doing a lot of things for a week or days, days, weeks, whatever. And then like, "Oh yeah, good, but you need to redo it." Like that's very wasteful to me. And I'm a little bit allergic to waste. I don't like wasteful things. Of course, like it's good if you learn something, but if it's because we didn't talk to each other, then that what
Yeah.
the only learning you can do from that is let's talk.
Well,
Let's talk
and
next time.
that's like a rework waste, like, it's speaking in terms of lean, right? And the 7 or 8 deadly wastes and all that.
Yeah,
Rework is in there, and often having a conversation at the right time avoids rework, right?
yeah,
I think if you have the conversation too early, and this is why we have Kanban boards with cards, is because if you have the conversation way too early, then everybody forgets what was talked about, and then they wrote it in a document that doesn't clearly describe what the requirement is, right? And if you have it way too late, then you have a pull request that has to be completely redone because, so it's all about. I totally agree with you. It's like it's about having the right conversations at the right time to eliminate overproduction or rework
Yeah.
in that regard.
And also, I think something that kind of dawned on me that I hadn't thought much about it before being in actual mob sessions. And that's all of the micro decisions that have to be made like
Oh yeah.
every single day. And there are so many of them that in some cases they're like so tiny and almost like, from my perspective, it's like I don't care. Like do whatever. It doesn't really matter. And sometimes it does matter. And it's a lot of times it's difficult to know like what is it that really matters and what doesn't matter. And in some cases me as a product manager or a designer or someone else who isn't actually doing the implementation is the one with information, is the one who can quickly make that like, or at least quickly realize, yeah, this is really important and this isn't important. So one thing that I noticed was that just being in the mob session, uh, having people like being available to quickly answer questions like, should we do this or this? Yeah, do this. If you aren't there, those questions needs to be, postponed and paused. And oh, we have to pause this. We have to do something else, and we have to, Slack Henrik or anyone else and ask, and then we'll do something else, and then like wait for that person to circle back with an answer, and so on and so forth. And in many cases, I think people would be stunned at, the kind of unimportance of those things, like of those questions. If you
Mhm.
had just been there and been able to answer in 1 second, it would have been just so much efficient and effective instead of, wasting hours or even days waiting for an answer. So that's also something, even when I'm not in mob sessions, I try to always be available for these kind of questions.
We
Um,
Yeah.
uh we were fortunate enough one day to have a unintentional experiment where we had four different product owners. One was available monthly, one was available weekly, one was available daily, and one was sitting in the mob regularly. And we could directly tie delivery frequency and rework to the availability of the product owner, and a lot of that boiled down to answering questions, and to the point where the product owner that was available only monthly, he was walking from building to building, and you'd see software developers chasing after him while he was walking from building to building, asking questions in between his meetings.
yeah.
So I absolutely resonate with the availability and the importance of being able to answer those questions quickly. And not everyone can be a domain expert, but at the meantime, you have to build the product, and so you have to have that that right cadence of
Yeah.
um, availability ratio. Yeah.
And uh, to me it's also about like it's not always about being able to give the answer right away. Sometimes you just can't. But in those times when you can't give a direct answer, I see it as kind of, it's my responsibility to get that answer as quickly as I possibly can. So if I get that kind of question directed towards me and I'm like, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out as quickly as I possibly can. I'm gonna, whatever meeting I'm in, most of them they don't mean much. So like uh, I mean meetings, that's kind of what we do as product managers. But I mean, sitting in many of those meetings, you can also, multitask. That's just the life of product managers. I try to multitask as much as possible in order to have developers multitask as little as possible, you know.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, yeah. And I think you're right because as soon as there's any question that the mob or team needs an answer to move forward, and the answer is not readily available, I think all the lean wastes really pick up. You can almost see all seven start immediately. Like
Mm.
people start weighing out the cost of interrupting someone else and all those kinds of things. And so I think you're right. Yeah, I've had an amazingly effective time where it really strongly impacts continuous delivery and quality when someone with the domain or product mindset is either in the mob or poof, they join the mob whenever we need them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
join the conversation and be like, "Is this what you meant, or is this what you meant, or what about
Mm,
this edge case, or what? How does the business or the domain really work?" And yeah, it's quite wonderful. And there's another thing I wanted to yes and onto when you were kind of talking about from a product manager's perspective, hating seeing the blame game go on within an organization or a team.
mhm.
And it reminds me back when I started my Agile journey before I was mobbing. A lot of the Agile coaching stuff or Scrum Master stuff was like start speaking in we terms instead of like I and you or they and them. And there was some effectiveness to it because some things like Scrum and stuff like that would help bring people who are heavily isolated and be less isolated. So the we had some reality to it, but it always felt fake, and I felt like everyone always knew it was fake to a degree. We're saying we, but we really know that Austin is the one who made that bug. You know what I mean? Like or whatever, right? But
Mm,
when you're mobbing, there is no one to point at except right back at yourself because we were all making it together, right?
yeah,
And so the
yeah.
blame game just kind of ceases, and it's just kind of like, all right, let's fix it, or we learned our lesson, let's do the mini retro and do stuff to prevent it from happening from now on, or stuff like that. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
And another positive side effect that I have noticed quite a lot is that since when many people um, are familiar with working in the same code base, it's also it's also much easier to go into someone else's code base, and that's a good thing. I mean, I try to also advocate as little kind of hindrances as there possibly can be. I mean, ownership isn't, talking about ownership within a team, for example, or within a domain. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't collaborate. We should always try to collaborate as much as
Mhm.
possible. And in some cases where, like, if it's, oh, we need something to be done, but it's in that team's domain, so they have ownership of that. But instead of, sending them a request and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, we're gonna have to do that in 2 sprints or whatever. Um, how about we just do it? Like, I mean, if we ask, is it okay if we just do this and we make a PR and da-da? And the side effect that I've noticed is that if it's common for you to work together in a group in the same code base regularly, it's generally much easier to also do, like, have that approach instead of asking people to do things. Just ask if we can do them. Like, okay, so if you are bloated with work, like you're choked, maybe we can just do it. It's an easy fix. Would that be okay? And most people say yes. Like, why wouldn't you? Why would you say no to someone fixing something instead of you fixing it yourself, right? So that's
Yeah.
a good thing I've noticed as well.
And yeah, having a certain level of quality associated with those changes and permission to make those moves and everything along those lines, I think tends to be really healthy in that regard. Kind of in the interest of time, do we want to pivot to minimum viable products and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. One of my, I have many passions, but that's one of them.
What are your thoughts on MVPs in general? And yeah, go from there. What do you think?
Yeah. So this is a funny thing because I think MVP is probably one of the most kind of, one of the most misunderstood concepts within software development or product development. And the funny thing about MVPs is that most of the misconceptions about stuff, be it agile or whatever, they tend to be quite binary, so to speak. It's like, yeah, we think it's this, but in reality, it's this. But with the MVP, the misconceptions are all over the place, and I guess it's because of the nature of the word viable. Like, what does viable mean? And it tends to be so easy to just omit that part and say, you either focus on the minimum, like we do the minimum thing. Yeah, but if the minimum thing is, I don't know how to say this in a less controversial, but like crap. If it's I don't know if is that
Yep.
swearing in English. I'm not a
Yeah.
I'm not a native English speaker, so that's fine. Okay, so but like if the minimum thing is really, really bad, why would we do it? And then in the other end, you have, oh, let's build a product. But like if you're building a product, a whole product for several months, then it is not minimum viable. Like it's a product. Like it's a
Right.
viable product. So you're kind of stuck in between sometimes these two places, and I've seen it many times, like when I've been in larger enterprises, like really big companies. They tend to kind of get stuck in the let's build the whole product thing. So
Right.
in those scenarios, you have to advocate moving faster. Like we have to be faster, we can't be this slow. But then you go to a startup or a scale up, and they're like, yeah, we can't spend we can't spend weeks on this. Let's just build this super fast. But you're building something very, very complex and complicated. You can't just spend a week doing this. It's gonna be crap. It's gonna be, the worst thing in the world. And then everybody knows that this is gonna be not a temporary thing, but a permanent thing that um, we have to sustain and maintain. So my kind of the what I've noticed is the thing we talk very little about when we talk about MVP is sustainability and scalability, because what tends to be thrown around is you shouldn't think about sustainability. Like that's something for later. But no, of course you should think about sustainability. It doesn't mean that you have to build the most sustainable thing, but you should think about sustainability, and you should think about it in the same way that you should think about scalability. Like, is it sustainable and or scalable? Sometimes you need to do something even like in that early phase that is quite scalable, but it doesn't have to be sustainable at at that point in time. And sometimes it's vice versa. It doesn't have to be scalable if it's sustainable, like over time. And this is like it's so interesting, especially like in the this whole age of AI buzzwords and tech bros talking about AI. One of the things that this is a rhetorical question, but still, I wanna ask this question: Who in their right minds would pay millions of dollars for something that was built in a week?
Hmm.
Like, who would do that? Like, why would anyone do that? Like, is that a sales pitch? Like, we built this in 1 week. Like, yes, take all my money. It's a, what? It doesn't make sense, right?
No. Will your competitor also build it in 1 week, or will they have something better in two? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, yeah, oh yeah, but your competitor, they built it in 4 days, so we're gonna give them all our money instead. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't buy a car that was built in 1 week. Like, why would I buy something, yeah, it's just that's so weird. So it's very fascinating seeing these two different worlds where, like, I have been known as a guy talking a lot about moving fast and doing the minimum viable thing, because I used to work at very big companies. But then I join smaller companies, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, this is really fast. Like, this is too fast. This is you can't go this fast when you don't even know where you're going. We're gonna hit a wall. Like, yeah. So it's super fascinating. I don't know what's your take on this.
Well, yeah. So I think there's the like build, design, or build, test, iteration, and learning from the customer. So I'm a big fan of minimum viable products in the sense that you don't have all the information right away, but it also, an MVP shouldn't be something that sticks around forever, because you do get into this trap of like, okay, now we have a minimum for that, and if you have external dependencies and you might not be able to work on that thing anymore, then it might stay the minimum forever, right? Because I think there's also this concept of cost of delay prioritization. And so maybe you've patched, that hole over there and that hole over there. And so I think you have to be very disciplined about choosing what not to do so that you
Mhm.
don't end up with perpetual minimum products. And
Yeah,
so that ends up being a challenge, I think.
and also being open for, like, also when we talk about these things, both in terms of like MVPs, but also in other processes with UX research and so on. We always talk about validation, but
Right.
we also need to talk about invalidation,
Right.
because if something is invalidated, that's equally resourceful as something being validated. Like, okay, so we do this experiment now, and it turns out we were wrong. So this was invalidated. That's great. That's a great learning for us. But since we're focusing so much on the validation part, it's almost like, oh yeah, this is gonna be validated regardless. So I mean, why are we even talking about the validation? Like this is already validated because the CEO said so, so or whatever, stakeholder X, Y, Z said so. So it's already validated, quote unquote. And yeah, so we're just gonna have to build this thing and then live with it and maintain it with, without any regards to sustainability or
Right.
scalability.
Yeah. And yeah, you obviously, if the CEO says do it, you can't choose not to do it, right? And so there is that where, you do have to have that philosophy all the way at the top. Otherwise, or do some sort of like shadow IT approach of learning from things, but on some level, you really can't ignore a request from the person paying the bills, right?
Yeah,
And so that I think is certainly a challenge. But there is something to be said for learning those things. So just like we were talking about earlier about having the conversation at the right time, I think that there's probably the right time to have the MVP, and the MVP should be more or less complete depending on the external competition that you have, because it can't be a minimum product without, the viable is a really important word in there, and it's a collaborative effort to decide what is viable, right?
it is.
Yeah.
It is definitely. And what helped me is to actually think about these things in terms of scalability and sustainability. In some way, like in some cases, um, it does, like an MVP doesn't have to be either sustainable or scalable. But in many cases, and that's the thing, because MVPs as a concept is mostly thrown around when it comes to something that doesn't exist. Like, okay, so we have this idea, we have a business idea, and we just want to see if it sticks. But MVP as a concept is very, very powerful. Also, when used in an environment where we already have lots of knowns, like we already have a business, we just wanna, we're building something new, or we're doing continuous development, whatever it is. Because I think the important part of MVP is actually the follow up, is tracking the things, like what are we doing and why. The
Yeah.
the the thing with the MVP is supposed, like, okay, we're trying to achieve something. What is it that we want to achieve? What is the desired outcome? And how do we measure whether or not we're actually achieving what we set out to achieve? That's the main purpose of the MVP, and that's why I think it's really powerful. But you very often end up in these situations where it's just something minimum thrown together, and they're like, okay, yeah, so now we need to maintain this. But thinking about it from a sustainability and scalability perspective, in some cases, even though you decide, okay, we're not going to do this in a sustainable and scalable way, but if we would, this is what it would look like. So we know what, like, if it gets validated, okay, so this is how we need to pivot this. These are the parts that we need to redo, or maybe just, scrap everything and start all over from the beginning. But like, this is the plan then for how to approach that.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that. And it highlights that an MVP is a more nuanced, multifaceted, rich concept than how I think a lot of people use it, right? It is the foundation for which we are going to inspect and adapt and discover the innovation or the next best version of the product or even the next best product. And so it has to have certain qualities to be that thing that we start with and mold and shape as we get feedback, right? And so I have a follow-up question, but I sense it might be related to your take on moving fast and maybe
Hmm.
breaking stuff.
Hmm.
So maybe we'll jump into that, and then I can ask my follow-up question. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, so I actually think that move fast and break things is also a pretty misunderstood concept,
Mhm.
probably even from, Facebook themselves, because so a few years ago they kind of they retracted and said, yeah, no, this is not our motto anymore. But in my mind, it's actually a great motto: move fast and break things. But I probably see it from a kind of different perspective, because in my mind it's not about breaking things. That's not the purpose. The purpose is like, let's break things.
Yeah.
but but in my mind it's like, if we move fast and we have a contingency plan, we know what to do when things break, because they are inevitably going to break. They always do. But and to me, it's this is more about, like, if you do a lot if you do a lot of planning, like if you have months of planning. I was at this company, a pretty huge company, where they had like high level analysis for 6 months to 1 year, like before even doing anything. um, and if you do that, you tend to get this false pretense that, oh, we covered everything. So if we just follow this plan, everything is gonna be fine. You're like, nothing's gonna happen. We know there are no unknowns, but there are always unknowns. So
Mhm.
then you start doing these things, and then an unknown turn up, and oh crap, something broke. We have no idea what to do. We're completely paralyzed because we didn't even think that stuff could break, because we thought we already thought of everything.
Mm.
But if you instead have the approach that stuff will break, they always break. Stuff breaks all the time. So if we know that they will break, we can have a contingency plan for whenever stuff breaks. And
Mm.
then we can move fast, because our mindset is that things will break, and we will not necessarily know what it is that's going to break. So we need to adapt. That's where we need to be adaptive. But I also think that in order to do so, you need to have a strategy. You need to have a direction. It's not like you can't just pick any direction and run as fast as you can, because then you're gonna fall off a cliff and die. Like that's not good. Uh, or even, with these examples where, sure, you can have the fastest moving car, but if you're moving in the wrong direction, I'm still gonna beat you running a tractor, or those what's in the Straight Story by David Lynch, where this like a lawnmower. this, yeah, yeah, but you get the point. Kind of like, I would outpace you by bicycle if I'm just going in the right direction and you're going in the opposite direction.
Mhm.
So again, if you have that, if you plan for that, and I think that kind of planning needs to be like put to a minimum, like the planning before you start doing things. That's what we want to decrease. Like, we want to have as little planning as possible before actually starting to do things. But what we do need before starting to do those things is the strategy. It is the direction. It is the, like, high level,
Mhm.
because it's much easier to know how we need to adapt when things break, and they inevitably will. That's my take.
Yeah, 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 I love that. And this might be what you're saying, or maybe not. So maybe I'm asking for correction, clarification here. Because it seems like and maybe this is me sitting in a developer, seat, or, part of a team making the thing. When I hear move fast and break stuff, means make, shoddy code that is low
Mhm.
quality and do it quickly and expect it to blow up in front of customers. And that's okay. You know what I mean? Kind of like that. That's what I hear in my mind, right? But I think what you're saying instead, because I hear people talk about it in that way.
Yeah.
But what I hear you talking about instead, the way it translates in my head is we have assumptions about what we think the customer needs or what we think will solve their problems. And those things are going to be broken by delivering or running experiments and things like that. How can we fail or break as quickly as we can and in safe ways, right?
Yeah.
How can we bring safety into it such that when it our assumptions are wrong, we can adjust quickly, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, correction, clarification. Am I tracking or no?
That's exactly what I'm trying to say, because
Yes, yeah.
there's no worse thing that, like, the easiest way not to fail is just, you know not doing anything. Like if you don't
Yes.
do it, you can't fail.
Yes.
Like that's 100% fail proof. Don't do it and you won't fail,
Right.
but you
Right.
won't
Yeah.
succeed either. So that's a pretty bad
Mhm.
bad option. And then the next worst thing is to fail very, very, very slowly. Like if you start, you plan forever and you think you have everything, and and then 2 years later you start doing things and then they break. Like that's, oh,
Mhm.
no, that's not great either. So let's fail as quickly as possible. But it doesn't mean that we want to fail. It just means that if we fail, which we will do in some way or another, it doesn't mean that like the
Mhm.
whole, let's say we're building a new feature, it doesn't mean that the whole feature fails, but some part of it might fail. And we want to fail with that part as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah, fail
Mhm.
fast and fail
Fail
often,
fast.
but don't. Yeah, move fast and have a contingency plan. Maybe just doesn't sound as good as move that fast and break things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that move fast and break things just means something different to many people, and that is kind of the trouble with pithy statements is that there's quite a lot of room for interpretation, and so having somewhere outlining like what exactly something like that means, and because if you just say move fast and break things, and I think this is where Meta got in trouble, is that that can mean an absence of safety, and that
Yeah.
doesn't contradict right the situation, right? And so if it's like safely move that fast and break things, then kind of to the contingency plan point, then it takes on a whole different meaning. It might imply that we're doing automated testing and that we're validating our assumptions against, like validating a assumption against a customer is moving fast in the sense that you're not doing the slow
Mm.
failure and learning about it way too late, right? And maybe that customer encounter with the new thing might break it. And so moving fast and breaking things in that regard is a very good habit to have, right?
Yeah. And I think there are a few examples of this, and it also kind of ties into the whole MVP concept. But there are a few examples of this in the Pixar movie Cars from 2006.
Yeah, there you
Great
go.
Nice.
movie, love it. But one of them is of course the race between Lightning McQueen and Doc Hudson,
Yeah,
where he's like he's overconfident, obviously, and he's just he's going full steam space machine, and he falls off the track because he doesn't know how to drift, and it's
right.
a dirt road basically. Doc Hudson, meanwhile, he's just he doesn't even start at the beginning. They're like nee, 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 because he knows for a fact that he's gonna fail. And obviously, these are also like the good example here is that Lightning McQueen, that's just the completely clueless way of moving fast. Where, yeah, I mean, of course you're gonna fail if you do this. Like you're not even trying not to fail if you do this because you're going into something where you have no idea what you're doing and you're going full speed ahead. Like that's not a great idea. And then of
Right.
course Doc Hudson, meanwhile, he's the opposite, where it's like, yeah, whatever. Like in that, of course, like in this case, he knows that he's gonna win anyway. But let's just assume that okay, we are somewhere in between these two characters, and we're a car that like we have never raced on dirt before. So how can we go as quickly as possible on this dirt track without, falling off the falling off the track, without completely failing? Like, of course, we can't go full speed ahead, but we should be able to have some kind of pace, better
Yeah.
pace than Doc Hudson. That's kind of, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are kind of running up on time here, and so I just wanted to ask if there's anything that you wanted to plug or share before we closed it out.
Yeah, so just a little bit first and foremost, a huge shout out to William Banting, your former guest on this podcast, a great friend of mine. I love everything he's doing. He needs to write more, insightful articles about stuff. Maybe, we can the three of us can help him a little bit, like doing more stuff. But also, like, I help companies like on the side with design systems and headless content modeling. I'm a content modelist and I've been working with design systems for quite some time. So, if anyone is interested in learning more about headless content management and or design systems, just reach out on LinkedIn and connect on LinkedIn and so on.
Right.
And last but not least, a little bit of whimsical thing, but I'm a hobby musician, and I have this one man band. I call it mellanchef. It's a Swedish word. It means middle manager, and it's a gent.
Uh,
It's a it's an instrumental gent project where it's like, I don't know if you've heard of Meshuggah, probably the best band in the world, but
mm,
like very odd time signatures and yeah, Swedish death metal. So if you're into those kind of things and titles related to middle management, then yeah, it's on Spotify.
awesome. All right. All
Nice.
right. Sounds great. Thanks, Henrik, for joining us today. And to our audience, maybe you know a product owner or product manager out there, and maybe you're having trouble communicating, or maybe there can be some improvements. Maybe share this episode with them to kind of get them exposed to mob development, and be sure to like and subscribe and share the video and chat with us in the comments. What's your experience with your product colleagues? And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Bye.